Hello, hello, hello. How's everyone doing out there in niche fish podcast world? My name is Brian Brinkman. I'm here with Megan and Jonathan on a rainy, cool Monday morning here in Denver, Colorado. This is the rainy season out in Colorado, as we call it. It is much needed. It's not raining as much as it should be raining. We need much more than this. But I think that this is like the peak of what we're going to get for the next 12 months. So I'm wearing a flannel. I wore shoes today for the first time in weeks. I've been wearing sandals just as if like
hippie.
it's summertime. I know, total. I didn't drive with my windows down today. We had to remember a coat for my son, all these sorts of things.
Wow. How did you do it today, Brian? This is a lot.
Well, Meg, I'll tell you what I did. I put on some music and I put my head down and I just moved forward through the day because that's the only thing you can do in these times,
Yeah. I'm impressed.
Thank you.
I find moving backwards through the day is actually great because you know what's happened already, and it really helps to succeed.
It's an interesting point. I would love to somehow mirror the way I feel around like 9:30 at night when I'm like, that list was accomplished.
Everything's just
I feel
fine.
good. I'd love to like mimic that at like 5:45 in the morning when my dogs get me up. But that's just not the way that the world works.
Did you start this off by calling this a niche podcast?
He did.
It is, yeah.
I'm sorry, I only do mainstream fish podcasts.
This
that's
probably
what this
is.
was.
We're mainstream now because of the whale.
My manager
We are.
said this was mainstream when they
Yeah.
signed me up for it.
Yeah, we lied to your manager.
Oh, God damn it.
I
have to
actually
have words with
stole
him.
that intro. There's probably someone out there listening. I'll hold off telling you where I stole that from. If there's a listener out there who knows what other niche podcast I stole that intro from, respond here and we will sing your praises. But before we get into the contest portion of today's show, Meg, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I've had some downtime,
You
like
have-
maybe some of our listeners have. And, it's been nice. I should have been reading more, but I did a lot of cooking. And mainly I just listened to Phish and watched TV. So I needed
Sounds
it.
all right.
I needed
That
it.
sounds pretty good.
I finished Ozark, which is incredible if you haven't seen it.
Haven't.
I watched a lot of bad TV. It was great. I really needed the downtime, honestly.
It's fair.
So
I made the mistake when I got COVID of I grabbed like 7 books and I brought them downstairs and I was like, I'm going to read all these books. And I made it through 1.5 of them.
you propped your feet up on
Very
them.
ambitious.
I was just like, that's interesting. That's interesting. That's it. I'm downstairs for 6 days or however long I was downstairs for. Like I should probably do some reading. And I just, as I do on every vacation, I just over selected books. And then I read through one of them.
That's an accomplishment, though. I think I read like half a New Yorker and like 25 pages of a book. So you did better than I did.
John, how are you doing? Jonathan, how are you doing?
I'm okay. I'm tired. It's been a long weekend of not a lot going on, and it's probably the last one of those for a little while because I've got a child graduating from high school this month, so
Ooh,
everything happens this month.
everything.
Yeah.
So, and I decided to go ahead and release an album, shameless plug, at the end of this month. So I'm doing that stuff too. So because I'm smart.
Exciting. An album with amazing cover art, I will say.
Yes. Thank you.
Can we give you between 30 and 85 seconds to promote your album right now?
Nah, it's
Yes.
just
Please?
go to jmhart.bandcamp.com or search j.m.hart on your Apple Musics or your, I don't know, Pandora, Amazon Music, those things, but not that one that begins with an S because I don't do that. I'm not there.
Well done. Yeah.
They kicked me off once already, so I'm not going back.
Mm-mm. The Bandcamp is great for anyone out there who does not utilize the services. Not
Love
only
it.
do you get a ton of money that goes directly to the artist, but what is it, the first Friday or the last Friday of the month?
It's first Friday. In fact, this coming Friday. So if you go to Bandcamp to find my album, just make sure you have it set up an account, put me on your wish list, and then go back there on Friday, and then you can order the CD or the digital, which you'll get on the day it releases. Might be shipping CDs prior to release because I'll have them by then, and then all of the money will come to me minus whatever PayPal wants, because of course somebody's got to get
Someone's got to
some.
take something.
Yeah.
That's so
But it's
great, though.
amazing. It's amazing. Like you get to listen to, I think, an album like 2 times through if you like utilize Bandcamp's service. Free listen 2 times through, something like that, similar to the other streaming sites. But then they do this thing where if it's your third time through, they're like, hey, I think you like this record. Why don't we give the artist a little bit of money? And it's a good way of being like, yeah, I've listened to this a couple of times. I'll probably listen to it more. How about I give you some money so that you can make another record?
Yep.
Amazing concept.
And it's great. The app is pretty usable now, especially now because you can do playlists and queue up stuff and download stuff offline if you go places where you're offline. And if you are like me and you buy a crap ton of music through Bandcamp, and you should be like me, then you will never be without a ton of great music.
Always.
And you will have supported the artists.
So,
okay,
Jonathan has a new record coming out. What is the name of the record again? I'm sorry.
It's called Slips, Trips, and Falls.
That's a good album title.
Yeah, good title.
I like that.
Thank you.
We will be listening to Jonathan's record when it comes out live and commenting on it. Good points.
I think I'm busy that day.
I can't wait to hear it. I loved your last record. And I love
you.
your music overall. So we are talking today, though, about the early years of Phish. And we are talking specifically about the first gig where Mr. Page McConnell sat down with Phish and some amazing things happened. And we're going to dive into that. We're talking 5/3/85, which was at the University of Vermont. This was the last day party at Redstone campus. It's an outdoor show. There's 3 sets. We've only got 2 that are available for listen, but the full set list is available online, which is really cool. And we get some Jeff segments. We get some humor. We get some Grateful Dead. And then we get Page McConnell joining Phish. And we start to hear just this hint of where this band is going. It's really fascinating. I can't wait to dive into this.
Some of these things happen all at the same time.
All at the exact
Yes, they do.
And we get a little ditty in the encore that has only been played 12 times and would just make an amazing bust out and would really test your Phish nerdery. But we'll get into all of that. Quite a song. We're also going to talk about our favorite songs Page has written and contributed to Phish. And we're going to talk about our favorite moments that Page McConnell has contributed to improvisational jams. I had a lot of fun listening back to some improvisational jams that feature specific Page moments here, but we're going to jump into the show first, 5/3/85, right after we hear a word from our sponsors. Meg.
You know who our sponsor is? It's Sunset Lake CBD. Their line of smokable hemp products are for the old deadhead, Jonathan Hart, or the
Who's
young
old?
Phish fan, like me. Anyone searching for a mellow body high. Smoking CBD has all the benefits of high THC cannabis without the paranoid and anxious side effects. There are 9 different strains from this year's harvest, and there's something for everyone. The Hawaiian Haze is awesome for an outdoor show, and Cherry Abacus is best for the end of the night. All of the flower is grown, cured, and trimmed by Sunset Lake CBD farmers. Even better, Sunset Lake CBD has this farm-to-table approach, so they get you great pricing on premium CBD flower because they ship directly from their farm to your door.
Can I
And
interject here and tell
yes,
you
please.
because I just ordered a bunch of stuff the other night. I was like, yeah, my balm is getting a little low, and things are getting a little low. So I jumped on their
Gotta be on
website.
top of that.
Easy to use, so many options. It's almost a little like, well, that's a me problem, right? Like too many options. But I found what I needed, got it in there. There's a cool code that I know you're going to tell everybody about here in a second. Plug that in, boom, saved a bunch of money, and it's already shipped, and it will be here any minute now.
They
Okay,
have
maybe
the
a couple
fastest
days,
shipping.
but
The fastest
so
shipping.
fast.
It's amazing. Yeah, I really relied on this last week while I was just recovering. And every night before I went to bed, I was either taking gummy or what I really started to do was use the tincture. The tincture is great. It tastes great. I was putting a generous amount under my tongue and just slipping into like a really solid sleep. And I needed that. So I know that people have had a lot of problems sleeping while they're dealing with COVID. So I would highly recommend trying some CBD. It was great for me. So check them out today at sunsetlakecbd.com and use our coupon code that Jonathan was talking about. It's HFPod, and you're going to get 20% off all your products. Sunset Lake CBD, farmer owned, Vermont grown.
You want to know what my move is?
What? Let's hear it.
So I'm here in Mountain Time, and one of the benefits of Mountain Time is that we get late night baseball games at a reasonable hour. So I'm talking like Seattle Mariners, Los Angeles Angels, the Dodgers, the Giants, the Athletics. And so I'll be doing some work or hanging out on the couch, and I will make a cup of tea and I'll throw some of the tincture in there. By the time I'm done with that cup of tea, it does not matter where we're at the baseball game. I'm ready. Like I could sink into the couch, but it's my sign that, all right, we're tired. It's ready to go to bed. And I go to bed with complete ease. I've been off social media for the last 2 months at this point in time. So there's nothing to look at in bed. It's just,
You're missing so much, though.
I know,
How are you
a lot.
living, Brian? How are you
Oh,
living?
the melts.
The snark in me has just like, it's almost cleansed out of my pores. I don't have any snark. Everything is,
Wow.
I'm so earnest right now. It's
You
crazy.
are.
But that's my move, and it's a good move in the evening, and I highly recommend it. Speaking of mellow tones that slip you off into another universe, I can't wait to talk about the other one jam here and the contributions of Mr. Paige McConnell. But before we get all the way to set 3, I'm going to set the table a little bit here. So Phish forms the campus of the University of Vermont in the fall of 1983. They play their first gig on December 2nd, 1983. According to Phish.net, we have a handful of Phish shows that occur throughout 1984. At one point here, Trey is kicked out of school for a fun prank. The band reconvenes in 1985. I believe it's the summer after this semester that Trey and Fishman travel to Europe and backpack around Europe and write a number of songs, including Harry Hood, after according to Trey, a near-death experience in the Mediterranean Sea. But this spring of 1985 is really like the start of this band kind of coming together and playing gigs. They're playing fairly regular gigs. There's a really good gig in March that is discussed in episode 2 of the first season of Undermine. But coming ahead to the end of the school year in May 1985, 37 years ago tomorrow, the same amount of time has passed since yours truly has been on this planet as well. Make of that what you will. Phish gets together to play a show on Redstone campus for the UVM last day party. They play 3 sets. The first set is current Phish at that point in time, which is Trey, Mike, Jeff Holdsworth, and Fishman. And at one point towards the end of the first set, following Dave's energy guide, Trey says, we're going to play one more song. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to bring our friend Paige McConnell up on keys. Who would have known? In front of a handful of people. Jeff's got a new amp, but they're playing on their gear that they've just been playing on. Who would have known that this guy who's going to join them on keys is not just joining for one performance, but is going to become a central cog in this band, a central leg to the table that is Phish, if you will, and is going to take the band in places that none of them could have foreseen when they initially started this art project, if you will, and is going to completely change Trey's perspective, who initially thought that Phish was a 2-guitar band.
Maybe Mike knew. I feel like Mike might have known.
I think Mike knew.
Mike might have known.
Mike's never going to tell you what he knew. Just forget it. I don't know what that means. Sorry.
Megan, what are your thoughts as you think back to the earliest days of Phish? What are your thoughts about this kind of in-between period where it's a 2-guitar band and then Paige joins? What does that sound feel like to you as a Phish listener?
It's really hard for me to pick out the differences between the 2 guitars. To me, they kind of sound, I'm always trying to figure out who's playing what. I guess I'm just not sophisticated enough of a listener. But I think the minute that you hear Paige join the band in this third set, there's such a richness to the sound that they lack before that. It just sounds more full and more complete to me. And I think that's why Mike actually really wanted Paige in the band. And I love the stories of how when Fishman and Trey went away for the summer to Europe, that Mike has these like secret meetings with Paige. I don't know if they're secret, and he teaches him a bunch of the catalog, a bunch of the Phish songs, so that when they come back, Mike's like, oh, Paige is here. And Trey's like, I don't know. But then it's kind of like, no, Paige is here and he just knows it all. And here he is playing it. And it sounds like it just kind of evolved like that. So I love thinking that Mike actually had an idea that this is really would be a benefit to the band.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's the type of thing that kind of makes you realize that this was always a group project rather than like a Trey-led project. Mm-hmm. So many of the initial songs are Trey, but like without Mike pushing that, the band goes in a completely different direction. And that kind of reminds me of, there's an anecdote in the Phish book where Mike teaches the band a song by Max Creek, but pretends that it's his own song. And then they won't learn it because Trey doesn't want to play covers at that point in time. And then they're all at a Max Creek show like months later, and the band plays the song that Mike taught them, and Mike's like, I don't know what happened.
That's amazing. See, Mike, he's sneaky, but he gets what he wants.
He does. It's pretty amazing. Jonathan, what are your thoughts at this point? You've spoken at length about this era of Phish, but what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, it's funny listening to this show in isolation, whereas last time I think I listened to this was when we were working on Undermine Season 1, and I listened to a lot, if not almost all, of the 80s Phish that circulates, which is still quite a bit, despite the significant gaps. And I found that I had some of the same trouble that Meg has in identifying when it's Trey and when it's Jeff. Sometimes I'm like, oh, well, that's definitely Trey.
Yeah.
And then other times it's like, and I think this is one of the problems with the 2-guitar Phish. And one of the reasons why 2-guitar Phish probably never truly had a significant future. Like, everybody knows the story, Jeff wasn't really down with some of the material that they were doing, didn't want to learn it, couldn't learn it, whatever, but wasn't really into it, and kind of saw another path. He graduated and saw another path for himself and left. But had he not felt that way, would it have held up? I'm not sure. They were not carving when the Grateful Dead were a two guitar band in the 60s, so actually they were always a two guitar band, of course, but when they in the 60s, when they were playing off the shelf guitars before Jerry started customizing and whatnot, they really made a point of playing kind of different sounding guitars.
Yeah.
Not day one, but very
Definitely.
early on, they started to realize, if I play this and while you play that, we could craft different sounds. And sometimes they would maybe still be playing the same, like a Gibson, Jerry on like an SG and Bobby on a different one. And, but they would craft distinct tones. These guys weren't really doing that yet. And it's probably fine when you're in the room, but it doesn't hold on tape. Like it really is like, who's doing what, and it's almost, I don't know if it's important who's doing what, but it, you know, like when you listen to Dave's Energy Guide, it actually doesn't matter who's doing what. It kind of
Right.
works, right? But when you listen to the jams in the second or the third set, but the second set that we have, which is the third set, yeah, it gets almost a little confusing and frustrating. And then there's Paige, who is just flowing right through. Sometimes hard to hear because of the quality of the tape. It's not a tonal thing though; it's just the tape. But he's making the bed, and maybe even forming the glue that is kind of running in between all the spaces. I like it.
I think the Grateful Dead comp is a really good one for where the band was at this point in time, especially when you think about how the Grateful Dead evolved with two guitars into the 1970s. There's no mistaking Bob Weir's guitar playing to Jerry Garcia's. It's not just the guitars, it's
No.
the styles. You know,
Well,
Bob Weir's
Bobby couldn't play when the Grateful Dead started,
right
and learned to play sitting beside Jerry and learned
and
to play
playing
to
along with him.
complement him.
Yeah.
Whereas these
Yeah.
guys both came into Phish, formed Phish, both knowing how to play, generally.
And Bob cultivated like a real rhythm guitar sound. You know, he listened
Yeah.
to jazz rhythm players who he cultivated that as a
Yeah.
compliment to Jerry. Yeah.
Whereas these
Well, and
two
you get this
guys are
sense-
like doing a sort of a dual lead thing, but really they're doing
Yeah.
a singular lead that is not the same as like Dwayne Allman, Dickie Betts or something.
Yeah, you get the sense, and I remember when we talked to Jeff Holdsworth for season 1 of Undermine, you get the sense that Jeff came to college really knowing how to play guitar. And he'd been playing guitar throughout the late 1970s into the early 1980s. And he really impressed Trey. And at that point, Trey was still really learning how to play guitar and still not even finding his voice, just figuring out like, how do I approach this instrument in a lot of cases. And that changes in a very short window of time.
Yeah,
and when
he
that
was
changes,
super focused and
Right.
just like he came in, he was probably the hot shit of his friend group though as a guitar player,
right.
and then just. But we all probably knew somebody like that in high school, and like when you're in high school, you're like, that guy's pretty good, and then you go to a show and you're like, oh no, that's pretty good. But Trey quickly bridged that gap.
Bridges that gap, and the focus that you talked about, like the sense that Trey saw something way beyond where he currently was, and way beyond even where Phish had the ability to be in the early part of college, that would ultimately impact his own practicing, and it would ultimately impact the way that his guitar would sound as as he evolved in the 1980s. And I get the impression from hearing what Holdsworth has said and from hearing Phish at this point in time that it was a fun thing for him. It was fun to be in a band. And when that stopped being fun, or when he kind of reached the end of the line, he was done. And Trey had 30 plus years of evolution to go through on a massive scale. And when you hear Paige come in, and we're going to talk a little bit about his own journey, his own improvisational journey, and his own education, but you hear almost immediately in this show the complimenting, where we're talking about there's not even like a duel between Trey and Jeff. It's more just here's what we both play, go, straight at you. With Paige, you suddenly get that compliment that you don't get with two guitars. Should we jump into 5385 and talk a bit about this show?
Sure.
Let's do it.
So we get segments of this tape. It would be amazing to hear this full show. And for anyone listening out there, for anyone hanging with us, please feel free to share your thoughts on this show, on overall your views on how Paige has impacted Phish, and your thoughts on kind of favorite jams. We'll share those as we move into the second half of the show. But set one of this show is Slave to the Traffic Light, Mike's, Dave's Energy Guide, and Big Leg Emma. Which I believe is the only time we've ever heard this song live, but we only have on tape Mike's into Dave's Energy Guide. What were your guys' thoughts on the Mike song? Megan, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. Like you were saying before, Brian, about how Trey had bigger ideas than even what they could play then. Like, it's incredible to hear Mike's and later Antelope, where these are just monster songs, but this is kind of in their infancy, and you can hear them kind of like they're slow and they're like a little clunky. They're really like sophisticated musical ideas, but they're still working the chops to like play really complicated music. I feel like they sound like the early Beatles when they're singing this. It's just, they have this like earnestness and this like forwardness in their sound and their voice when they're singing. And just, to me, it was like really endearing. I mean, the bass line's amazing. Fishman sounds great. Trey does this like impressive solo. And then there are some additional lyrics, which are kind of hard to hear before they segue into Dave's Energy Guide. I don't know what they're saying, but I've never heard that before. But the Dave's Energy Guide is very spirited. And I love Trey's comment after. He says something like, for those of you that have trouble directing your energy, that will be available on cassettes and records soon.
Still waiting on that record.
Yeah, I'm like, really? Haven't gotten it yet. But I just love that. I know you were talking about it last week about this song, but it's just so crazy that the song only was played 21 times, Dave's Energy Guide, but it's been teased it's probably been teased over like 150 times. It's just as recently as in the Piper.
It depends on who you trust.
Yeah, that's true.
Some more than others.
Yeah.
Jonathan, what were your thoughts on this, Mike's?
I think it's cool. I love all this old stuff. I'm an 80s Phish fan. I enjoy listening to these songs as they're taking shape. And, I like the notion of the band writing a song they can't quite play. So, does that make sense?
Yeah.
No,
totally. I love
like they're right. It's written with ambition.
Yeah.
I mean, I should try that. It's really hard when you're solo.
Yeah.
But they're going for it in spite of the fact that they're just, they didn't quite go as far as they would one day. I mean, it was 9 years before I saw them doing anything, and they were, light years beyond this in like their kind of control and mastery, and probably played half as many notes, that's an art. I dig it. I think it's so cool. And can we just talk about Dave's, or do you want to talk about Mike's first, Brian? Because this
jump in.
I don't have a lot to say on it other than it's really cool, and it is weird meditative music. And you can really hear the not classic rock influences on Trey and the band as at large in this piece, and I think it's very cool to listen to.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about the not classic rock influences. Like, this is as close to a King Crimson song that we'll probably ever get from Phish, especially at this point.
I don't know. I heard they're going to cover Red this summer in its entirety at Deer Creek.
I believe that.
Deer Creek.
Let's spread that.
You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah, just write that down. In pencil.
It's interesting because I was thinking about this. I was listening to this show yesterday morning, and I was thinking about like one of my great realizations. I don't know if it's great, but it was great to me throughout working on Undermine season 1 was the clarity is which you hear that the actual influences for Trey at this point are Peter Gabriel, Robert Fripp, Brian Eno, and not necessarily the Grateful Dead. And yet you listen to a show like this and it's just scattered with Grateful Dead covers and an Allman Brothers cover. And it really shows this like really fascinating dichotomy between his fascination with British psych, folk, prog rock, this mashup, crazy Eastern style music, and this kind of the legacy of the 1960s, the legacy of classic rock in a jam sense, and that dichotomy has always been a part of what makes Phish such a unique stew in music. And so you listen to this Dave's Energy Guide, and it's you talk ambition, like it's such an ambitious song to throw out in an early stage in your career. The one thing I want to say about Mike's is I just love the way that they sing this song in the 1980s, the vocal inflections. Like they sound like they're trying to be like a British punk band. You mentioned the like early Beatles, and I totally hear what you're saying. Like everything is overemphasized in a way that it would not be later on. I also think it's fascinating that like Mike's song was one of the first Phish songs I learned on guitar. And it's a great riff. It's got a really catchy chorus that's really fun to play because it's like 3 chords. And then it's got this jam segment. And the jam segment is basically 2 chords that over the next nearly 40 years, they'll take in a multitude of directions. And it really kind of shows you like a good song can just stop after those things. Like you have that. Don't and we're talking Phish here that like has written so many compositions, and the restraint to be like, nope, that song, we're just going to let it be and we're going to let it organically grow for the next 40 years. I love that about this. But yeah, it's a fun first set. I think, to something we were saying earlier, it's challenging to differentiate at this level Trey versus Holdsworth because they're both playing similar guitars. They're both playing a similar kind of aggressive and forward seeking guitar style. But to hear them at this point and to hear a tape like this specifically where you get Phish without Page in one set, and the very next set you're going to get Phish with Page, really, really showcases the division of where this band is at this point.
Yeah, I love the comment about the vocals. I can hear, if I think about this song and I hear it in my head, I hear a 1989 version. I hear note for note. I hear the way they sing it. I hear the little vocal ad libs to it, and I hear that's how that song exists in my brain, unless I like try to remember a specific 90s version or whatever. And
Right.
I don't really try to remember a 3.0 version. So that's where I am.
I love that.
So set 2, we do not have on tape, but for those of you taking notes at home, we get Alumni Blues, Wild Child, Can't You Hear Me Knocking, a jam Into Cities, and then Bring It On Home. This is the first Phish known performance of Bring It On Home, and it's got Bobby Brown on harmonica, and I'm guessing it's not that Bobby Brown. But we don't have this set on tape.
You can't prove it.
You cannot.
You're right. I can't. There's no audio. I can't prove anything. What we do get is set 3, and I said it at the start of this, but I'll say it here again. At the end of set 1, right before they play Big Leg Emma, Trey says, "Our friend Paige from Goddard is going to sit in later." I just can't tell you how much I love that is actually on tape, because it's literally it's a historical timestamp there of Trey saying, "Our friend, we like this guy. He's pretty good at keyboards. He's gonna hang
Goddard.
out with us. He's from Goddard."
This is some
thing. Foreshadowing. And at the time, they're playing out in like a quad for a bunch of people in the middle of the afternoon. Literally nothing that actually happened in their career and this again is another thing I just love about going back to 80s Phish. Nothing that would happen to Phish going forward in their career could in any way have been predicted based on a show like this. They're buddies who can play music, who are deciding to play in front of people, whether they want to hear it or not.
Yeah.
Right. The barely invited band on the quad.
Exactly.
Right. So, set 3, we're going to jump into this. We open with Scarlet Begonias into Eyes of the World, 2 classic Dead covers. Of course, the very first Phish tape from 12203 has just 2 songs on the audio recording. Scarlet Begonias into Fire on the Mountain. We are still very clearly in a period where Trey is, if not obsessed with, he's inspired by, fascinated by the Grateful Dead, and kind of knows that the way to draw in a good crowd on a nice spring afternoon in Vermont, Friday afternoon, is to play a little bit of Grateful Dead. Jonathan, you host a Grateful Dead podcast on Osiris Media, Broke Down Pod. For those of you who are not aware of it, it is an amazing podcast. What are your thoughts on the way, sporadically, what are your thoughts on the way that Trey approaches the Grateful Dead at this era in comparison to, like, name your young jam band who wants to play the Grateful Dead?
Yeah, Trey is not trying to be the Grateful Dead. He's playing Grateful Dead songs. They are playing Grateful Dead songs, right? And they're not unfaithful to the material, but, they're not committing hard to the thing. This is not Grateful Dead tribute band. This is not Dark Star Orchestra in the early days or whatever. This is any number of good young bar bands, what have you, who, as you say, this is the kind of material that attracts some ears, and they do it justice. It's fun to listen to them do this, and I would stop and listen to a band playing this stuff anywhere. Sorry, to my wife, who would probably be like, dude, we got to, like, hang on. They're playing Scarlet. I'm sure it won't last more than 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's fun. And they do get into some improvisation, which is kind of, it's chill. It's a nice little jam. It's not quite a Scarlet Fire jam or anything like that. It's a little more uniquely theirs, which is great. And we can really hear some of Page's contributions in this, really making the sound complete. I think that, there are plenty of Dead cover acts or whatever that are doing it without a keyboard player or what have you. And I think that you can get away with it, but it's better if you have one. And I think they're proving that right here.
Agree. And it's kind of a groove and jam as it moves into Eyes of the World.
Totally.
It's their own take on it. It's faithful to the actual song itself, but then the jam is their own take on it. Megan, as someone who saw a number of Grateful Dead shows before you got into Phish, what are your thoughts on this? And what are your thoughts on, like, the Grateful Dead being an entry point for Phish? What does that mean to you?
Secretly, I love listening to Phish play the Grateful Dead. Clearly, they would have been the world's best Grateful Dead cover band.
Shouted from the mountaintops.
I know. Don't tell anybody.
No, shouted from the mountaintops.
I'm so glad they're not. Obviously, Trey is an incredible composer and had so many musical ideas, and I think he made all the right decisions by not going down that road. But it is so good. Just listening, even when he's singing Scarlet, like, it's really great. And I think listening to them, his solo is incredible. Scarlet Begonias. There's this beautiful transition into Eyes of the World. Like both of you have said, I echo that they really made it their own in a way that is hard to do because the Dead do it so well. It's very easy just to imitate them. But they really take on and have this like fullness and richness. And it's cool to see in this set how much improv they're doing, which maybe speaks to what Paige brought in a way that, you know, I know we're going to talk about more because improv is really what Paige is so great at. But I think just hearing them play these classic Grateful Dead songs just hits like a spot in my heart that is just like my dream. I've never heard them play any Grateful Dead live. I heard when right after Jerry died, I saw Phish at Shoreline in 95 in the fall, and I heard them dedicate I'm Blue and I'm Lonesome to Jerry. And that was a moment I'll never forget. But I would love and just die to hear them play a Grateful Dead song. It's like I feel like it's a dirty secret I have. I don't know.
To share. I want to build on what you were saying and add to what I was saying, which is I think part of why these songs work and they're not, you know, hardcore covers, but they're really nice is because, you know, Trey's really developing a voice.
Mhm.
Mike's got a voice
Yeah.
still in development. Fishman is singular, even at this young age.
Oh, he
He's
sounds
singular.
so good in these songs.
And Jeff, you know, he's not Bob Weir or Jerry Garcia, nor does he care to be. And I think that all works quite well. And I think that's what makes it sound like them, even though they're doing a pretty fair version of the song.
That's a really good way to put it. And it's interesting to think about this show in the context of, we talked about a show from April 29th, 1987 last week. So we're talking just 2 years ahead of time. And at that point, they're playing 3 complete sets full of music. I mean, this is a 3-set show, but this feels like all right, we've played for 45 minutes. We're just going to take a break. Okay, we've played for, you know, the show at Nectar's is like a full, we're going to give you 90 minutes. We're going to take a break. We're going to give you we're going to give you a full concert here. And it's got a lot of covers in it, but it's got a lot of Phish originals. And it's at a point when like Fluffhead is starting to come together, and You Enjoy Myself is together, and songs like I Am Hydrogen have come along. You know, we've got all these just moments of Phish coming together. And here we're at a point where most of this show that we have on tape are cover songs, and are cover songs in the sense of, you know, jam band legacy artists at this point in time. And yet, to your point, Jonathan and Megan, Phish is putting their own spin on it, and they're figuring out where their voice is, and they're playing these songs, you know, in a way that is a testament to Scarlet, Begonias, Eyes of the World, Whipping Post. But then immediately when they get into a jam segment, that jam is colored by their own ideas. And that, to me, like, you could never have predicted it at the time, but that's where you can start to hear ever so slightly the seeds of where this band would go long term.
You know, I think Whipping Post is one of the examples that disproves the rule, if you will. Like, here's a tune where I can really kind of differentiate between Trey and Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff is going for something a little more straight, and Trey is not. Trey is going for Dave's energy guide in Whipping Post. Not literally. He's not. I'm not saying there's a tease, guys. Just settle down, internet. I'm just saying that like he's approaching it differently, whereas Jeff is approaching it from a guy who's definitely spent a lot of time with Live at the Fillmore East, which is pretty cool. I mean, I'm down with that, but I've spent a lot of time with it too. But Trey's bringing other stuff, and I think that's where you can hear those paths diverge.
That spacey jam at the end of Whipping Post is awesome. It is awesome. It gets really spacey and cool.
This is, to me, the most impactful moment of the entire tape. There's a moment towards the end of this jam when it gets into the spacey zone where you hear, it's forward thinking. I don't want to say like you hear 10 years from now, but like what you hear the band doing, and you guys are absolutely right. Trey goes down to this kind of these low notes, and he's just kind of riffing for sound, and you can hear Mike start to give these like bubbly, like not necessarily melodic, but like they're fully conversational ideas. He's not just, you know, hitting whatever rhythm we need at this point in time. This is like Mike as inspired by Phil Lesh, where like I'm going to give you a statement that I'm going to say, and it's going to be from the bass, but it's also going to be as melodious as what you get from guitar. And Page, rather than following them, moves up to like the highest part of his keyboard and gives you these like twinkling little melodies to it. And it just, I was listening to it yesterday, it blew me away. And I was like, that is right there. If there's nothing else, and Fishman's just like on the toms in this like very subtle manner. If nothing else, that is kind of like the core of what this band is going to try to do over the next 40 years is figure out how do we, in an improvisational segment, find a conversation that we can all align on, but all say things that come from who we are as a person. And you can't teach that. And a lot of bands like, they'll jam, but they can't do that. That is a very hard thing to do when you either have it or you don't. And Phish has it, and they show it at this early stage. This jam fascinated me when I was listening to it yesterday.
I mean, like the earliest stage, right? This is the first time the four of them are on a stage, right?
And Page knew it. Clearly he knew, and he wanted to be part of this band and advocated for himself. And, I think that's really cool that he knew that he wanted to be a good part of this and would add to it.
Yeah. I mean, didn't he saw Phish and was like, I'm going to join that. He told people he was going to join that band.
Yeah, he booked them for his Spring Fest at Goddard, which is hilarious because apparently at the time Goddard only had 33 students, but the Spring Fest had 12 bands. That's so amazing. I feel like that's almost a band a person. It's pretty good odds,
It's more band than audience.
Yeah. And then his band Love
like
Goat. That's the best. And then his band Love Goat opened up at this show at UVM. So I think Page was kind of like stalking them in a good way.
I want to read from Page's The Art of Improvisation. This was what he wrote. He turned this in on December 19th, 1987. This was his senior thesis. Trey's senior thesis, obviously, was The Man Who Stepped Into Yesterday. This was Page's about improvisational music. In May of 1985 at Springfest, I was introduced to a band, Phish. I immediately knew I wanted to be a member. I moved to Burlington and I joined the band. It has taken roughly 2 years for me to figure out what my musical role is in the band. When I joined, there were 5 of us, 2 guitars, bass, drums, and keyboards. The music was extremely busy and there wasn't much space for me to shape the sound. After 1 year, one of the guitar players left and I began to grow into my space and develop my style. It was during my 4th semester that I began taking lessons with Lar Dungan, a jazz pianist in Burlington. The thing that's fascinating, like you can hear that in this. This is a very busy show. And that was, we've talked about that throughout this episode, is this kind of dynamic between Trey and Jeff was very, very busy. It was a lot of notes. And it was, hey, I can do this. Oh, I can do this. Hey, we can do this together. And with Page, and you hear it in this other one, the like hint of space is going to be the key, and simplicity is going to be the key.
Yeah, I mean, they had to learn to play with him as much as he had to learn to play with them. And the 4 guys had been filling all the space.
Mm-hmm.
And they hadn't, they had to figure out how to give him some and not just take a solo Page, which is, it's part of it, but it is not it. So
right.
That takes time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's something I remember reading about as we were putting together season 1. The King Crimson approach to playing is not you take a solo, now you take a solo, now you take a solo. It's we all take a solo together. We figure out a way that it's democratic and we're all pushing forward.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an idea that I wonder in some cases if that was, intentionally where Trey saw the band or where the band saw themselves in 1983 and 1984, or if now you get Page and suddenly there's a realization of, wait, we have another level that we need to try to get to. I want to read one other thing here from The Art of Improvisation before we finish this set. I think this is fascinating. This gets to what we've been talking about. Around 10th grade, I found a teacher who was going to teach me jazz improv. His name is Doug Fruhler. He has some interesting ideas concerning improvisation. He developed a theory that there weren't 7 modes as taught in Baroque theory, but that there were 72 modes. At the time, I wasn't familiar with modes at all, and even now, I'm not sure at how he arrived at the number 72. However, I did learn some important lessons from him. I learned that there is no right or wrong way to approach improvising, and that as long as you really put yourself into it, it can work. Doug and his method are perfect examples of this. I also learned some valuable tools through exercises that we did, primarily the tool of economy. Doug would have me do exercises where I would have to form melodies or play over blues progressions using only two, 3, or 4 notes. I found that this approach could work and that I could create interesting melodies with only a few notes. When I listen to this other one, I hear that. He's not playing anything complicated. He's just adding this color and this layer to what the band is already doing, and it totally changes the dynamic of things.
They don't need anything complicated at this point. Again, back to what I was saying before and what we've said a few times. So the complicated is happening. He's just, trying to ooze in the spaces, of which there weren't many.
Right, right.
But
which fascinating is going to be an issue for Phish for the next decade until they discover kind of this rhythmic type of style where Page is going to suddenly dominate in the band.
Yeah. Well, they had to learn to do the hey exercises and really, and then let them creep out on stage, right? But we're talking about the other one, but I want to talk about this bit in the Antelope, which is groovy.
Yeah.
Groovy as hell. There's this part where Mike comes through really clearly on the tape. It's nice. The mix is benefiting him at this point, and if you listen closely, I think it's about the middle part of the Antelope. Don't quote me, but he's doing. He's not really playing Antelope. They're jamming, and he's playing something for a few passes that reminds me exactly of. Oh God, I'm losing it. What's that song? My Soul. Sorry. And it's just a blues riff, right? It's not, he's not playing My Soul, of course, he's just, but like, love listening to Mike just kind of like fall into something spontaneously in the jam, and it works really nicely, and everybody kind of rides along with that, and they keep shifting, and cool jam. And the transition and going into the other one is it's A+. I don't know, 100, as the kids say.
I feel like this jam is one of the first times you hear like the tension and release build up that Phish just comes to be so known for and are just so good at. I think that you can really hear that Phish signature starting here. I love hearing this song in this version, because usually this song is an absolute force of nature. I mean, it's just like a wave that crashes, and I think now in this version, it's chiller. It's more, like you were saying, John, it's groovy. It's kind of meandering. And then you can just feel it kind of build up. And it's so exciting to hear them just end up in the other one. This is the only time they ever played this song. And it's beautiful. It's just a
that we know of.
version. That we know.
I'd like to believe that they did it a bunch of times. We just don't know about it.
I'd like to believe that too, Jonathan. We'll hold out hope.
I want to believe also the at Merriweather, they're going to do all of Skullfuck. So we'll get a little other one there too.
Perfect.
I'm curious, like, this is a niche.
Summer's going to be the
This is a niche Phish podcast. How are you getting set lists in advance?
Oh, I told you, I only do mainstream Phish podcasts, so I get mainstream info.
Instead of like the summer of '98, where they're going to do like a few covers every once in a while, now they're going to do like full albums at all the stops.
Yeah.
Okay.
What I can't wait for is a couple weeks from now when we do our summer 2022 preview episode and we tell everyone out there what songs will be played in what order.
Nobody.
Don't give it away, Brian.
Yeah, God.
I'm gonna just do it. I'm going
to have forgotten these predictions by then too.
I'm curious. We've talked so much here in this throughout this set of Phish's approach to the Grateful Dead. I don't mean to put the two of you on the spot here, but if you could request successfully one Grateful Dead song that would come to Phish and be a part of the rotation, like some of their other cover songs, what would it be? And why?
I have an answer.
Oh my God, I don't know if I do. You go, you go.
Crazy Fingers.
Oh, wow. I did not expect that answer.
Beautiful.
That is really
I wasn't
fascinating.
expecting that either.
That is a song that I think Phish could craft into a, you know, in their own manner of communicating as musicians. I think it would just be gorgeous. It would be worth our time. China Cat would be fun too. Thank you, Chipperson. I don't think that's your real name, guy. Come on. But Crazy Fingers, I just think it would be just gorgeous. And they can't play Rogue every night, so
Mhm.
Let's hope
It
not.
has. It has. Imagine digging up
oh damn.
old school HF pod rivals. Crazy Fingers would be such a great ballad in the second set that would lead to some improv. That's really cool.
You want to hear Trey play that, but Paige also like.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all of them. Yeah,
That's
I'm
a
excited
delicate
by this
song.
idea. It's a good thing they're going to bust that out at Raleigh.
I was gonna say China
Flying
Rider. I
tickets for
think just
Raleigh?
because like
Sure.
having those two songs, I think there are so many things that Phish does well that happen in those songs. So
Can we just ask them to do China Rider, just the China Rider jam? I mean, maybe China Cat into their China Rider jam, and
I
then
think
they
that's
can.
called double chocolate chalk dust torture.
Yeah, there you go.
mm-hmm.
That's got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've been playing around with the China Rider jam so much in recent
Mhm.
years. The Tweezer from 12/29/18 has elements of it. Yeah, you think of like a 74 China Rider when they would stretch it out to be, 12
Yeah.
or 15 minutes long, and
Right.
that would be great. My pick is my eternal pick. It's probably my favorite Grateful Dead song. Do a weather report, sweet. Do let it grow. It would be. It fits with like the kind of proggy aspect of what Phish was doing in the 1980s, but always has a great jam to it, and I feel like Paige could sing it really well.
You sure you don't really want Picasso Moon? I mean, as an '80s guy.
If we want to go down this rabbit hole, my first purchased Grateful Dead album was Nightfall of Diamonds. So one of the first Grateful Dead songs I ever heard was Picasso Moon. I got a soft spot for it. I could totally see Trey wanting to bust that
Picasso
out.
Moon.
Come on, bigger than a drive-in movie. Oh my,
Totally.
that'd be great. It would be fun. The thing
How
about
about
Picasso
Samba
Moon.
in the Rain?
Yeah,
Samba in
you
the
know what?
Rain?
I'd like that song. The thing about
I
Picasso
heard that
Moon
song
is it's a
100
song that I
times.
never wanted to see, but I always enjoyed.
Yeah.
Always enjoyed. God, another Picasso Moon. 2 seconds later.
Samba in the Rain, I think I heard at every Phish or Dead show that I saw. I saw 12, and I think they played Samba in the Rain every single time. I was like, this is really okay, guys. I get it.
Hey,
Yeah.
that's a Robert Hunter lyric, so you be careful.
Fair. Samba in the rain, baby. Samba in the rain.
Yeah, man, I can hear it.
We will.
Need
It's
Phish
really
to
gone
sing
off
that
the
one
rails.
up.
Our bonus segment this week is going to be us doing Grateful Dead 90s tracks karaoke style.
Oh, man.
Subscribe to HFPod Premium on Apple Podcasts to hear that.
Now definitely no one will.
Nah, they're gonna be. Well, no, they're gonna be so disappointed.
Since we're like slightly shitting on classic rock and live music from the late 80s, early 90s, I just want to say Trey calling out Trey speaking against apartheid in the Makisupa really channels U2 in the Rattle and Hum documentary during Silver and Gold when Bono calls out artists against apartheid, and then he asked the crowd,
Hey, that was a
"Am I
big thing,
bugging you?"
man. It was a big deal.
It was a big
Big
thing.
deal in the day.
Yeah, he asked the crowd, "Am I bugging you?" He says, "I don't mean to bug you." And then he tells the Edge, "Okay, Edge, play the blues." And the Edge comes in with just an amazing guitar riff, and it's amazing. And one of my first things I ever listened to from Phish was the Iculus, where they make fun of "This is Red Rocks, this is the Edge," and I was like, "Shit, I love U2. and I love this band Phish, and they're shitting on one of my favorite bands.
Of
And now
course
I
they
listen
were.
back. Of course they were. But now I
Mhm.
listen
But
back
they were
2 years earlier, and the earnestness, like Trey says "ja" like 75 times in this Mac is Super Policeman.
It's really
It
funny.
is it's really fun. Like there's like a true earnestness to try to embody reggae music here that when you think about the origins of the song is kind of hilarious. But so the show ends with you've got Antelope into Other One, and then we have an encore. They say we're going to play one more song, and they play the third version all time. 12 performances total. The last performance coming in 1989, which is crazy. 10/14/89. After a 133 show gap, we get Anarchy, which is like 14 seconds of Phish being just like as DIY hardcore punk as you can possibly get. It's unbelievable stuff.
Two things here. Back to Makasupa. I swear to God, I heard Paige teasing "You Can't Blame the Youth." It's on Talkin' Blues. You guys should know that album. If you don't, it's the best. Second, Anarchy would rule if they bring it back.
Mhm.
Certainly wouldn't take much effort on their part. So
No.
Brian is going to be really psyched when they play that at the encore at night 3 at Dick's.
It's definitely a Dick's bust out for sure.
Totally a Dick's bust out.
It's a Dick's bust out, 100%.
That's a bad sentence. We had to come up with another term.
Yeah, you're right.
We're gonna edit this podcast and go live again. We've been talking like so much about all these early 80s shows and like Lushington, Melt the Guns, Dave's Energy Guide, Anarchy, like all these songs.
Let's definitely need some.
We're putting it out there. We're putting out the vibes.
You brought back Fuck Your Face. Like there could be no more ridiculous, crazy 80s Phish song than that. We don't need, I would be happy for it, but we don't need Dear Mrs. Reagan. I get why they don't want to play it anymore. But these songs,
Prep School Hippie.
Melt the Gun, Prep School Hippie. Yeah. But these songs, like, even though Melt the Guns has a overt political message, let's just focus on the music. The music itself is just totally worth hearing. I know Phish wants to avoid politics with this sort of stuff, but like the music of Melt the Guns, come on.
And honestly, more Phish fans should listen to XTC. So let's cover Melt the Guns so that people will dig back in and listen to more great music.
This is a very good point. That was the origins for a Phish podcast at one point.
Crazy idea.
Crazy idea.
Never catch on.
Listen to other music well. What else do we have to say about this show before we move into our page appreciation segment of the show?
I like it. I think people should listen to more 80s Phish because it really connects you to where they're from. And I think, it's easy to just listen to, I mean, good God, they're playing so many shows. It's easy to just listen to Phish of this era. But you're missing out if you don't go back.
Could not agree more with that.
Totally agree. I feel like I know the band so much better after listening to these old shows, and it's just fun. And a show like this doesn't take that long to listen to. It's not like the shows now where it's like 4 hours and half your day is gone. This is not going to take you that long, and it's really fun.
I think my only last thought on it is like, in college, did you guys have like bands that you would see locally that you were like, man, this band is like really good, I could see them going places?
Not really. No. Okay. I just listened to Phish and the Grateful Dead.
Yeah,
and I mean, Herbie Hancock.
Kind of maybe one but I knew better.
I guess my point, like, I used to go see this band on like a regular basis. They were called Miller Creek, and they were so much fun, and they were so good, and they were like, they did. But it was also where they lived in Missoula, so it worked. But they'd cover Phish, they'd cover the Dead, but then they wrote their own songs, and like for a while, it seemed like okay, they were moving up, they were playing festivals on a local level, And it was probably very similar to where Phish was at in 1985 and 1986, just like slowly but surely branching out. And it's so crazy to me that this band just sets up on campus. People were walking by and people probably saw them and were like, thought nothing else of it. Just like, it's the hippie corner of campus. I want nothing to do with that party. And just walked on. And we're looking at a band that was going to headline Madison Square Garden 68
Smells like
times.
drugs over there. Keep walking.
We got finals.
Yeah.
It's at Goddard. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about Paige. We wanted to gush a bit about our guy Paige, the chairman of the boards.
You know, I went to my second Phish show. There was somebody at the time, there was somebody running for something around here. Their name was McConnell. They're running for chairman of something. And I took a sign that said McConnell for chairman to 12/28/94. And people were like, who's McConnell? I was like, are you fucking kidding me? I'm the noob here. And you're asking me this? Sorry, I just thought I'd bring that up. I'm still
Probably
bitter.
jumped off Dead tour. They probably weren't into it.
The worst.
To the 12 people that asked Jonathan that, he still is upset at you.
God damn it.
You know, when I first got into Phish, there was one of the appeals was Paige specifically, because I didn't really listen to any other rock bands that had a baby grand piano on stage, and featured moments like the Squirming Coil, where you have a dedicated segment at the end that is fully dedicated to his grand piano. One of my favorite early moments with Phish is when he plays that at the end of the Great Went set one, stands up, looks out at the crowd, kind of pauses for a second. The light is just absolutely perfect. It's like late summer, just after sunset, and he just holds out and just goes, stick around, and walks off stage. And I was like, this band is, I don't know what it is, but like that, this band is,
It's pretty great.
There's nothing like that moment when he's on stage alone at the end of Squirming Coil. It's just so magical, and the lights there, and it's a beautiful moment. That's like one of those theatrical things that Phish does that other people don't do.
It's a very good point. It's a very good point. Let's go around and let's share some of our favorite Paige McConnell songs. Megan, starting with you. What is, I don't know how many you have, but let's start going through your list here.
Well, before we do that, can I tell a story about when I met Paige?
Please.
Oh, yes, please.
Okay. So, Jonathan, you may have heard this before. It was when I was in Europe, and it was 1996, and we were touring with them, and I'd seen all the headline shows, and I went to one Santana show, and that was in Cologne, Germany. And there were probably 10 of us that went off the tour and went to this headlining show. But the headlining Santana shows were, where they opened for Santana, they were really expensive because Santana was legit, right? And so
big time.
Yeah, I don't remember what it cost, but it was something that was not something we had money for. And so we were trying to find a way to break in to the venue. And so there was like this fence that went up this hill, and there was a spot where you could kind of climb over to get into the venue. It was unclear what happened once you got over the fence, but we figured we could do it. And so we started throwing our backpacks over, and we started going over. And I was like 1 foot over the fence, and Paige walks by, and he looks at us, and he's just like, what are you guys doing? Like, what are you really trying to break in? And we're like, yeah, we can't afford the ticket. There's 8 of us here. And he was like, all right, give me one of your names. And he took our friend's name, and he was all on the guest list and got us all passes to go in, and was so nice, was like, enjoy the show, have a great time. So I go in the show, and I'm by the bathroom waiting, and he walks by again inside the venue, and he stops, and he's like, hey. And I was like, oh, hi. And he's like, you made it in. I was like, I made it in. Thank you so much. And, I was just so excited. And he was like, what's your name? And it was just, where did you travel from? And what are you doing here? And it was just so nice and thoughtful and considerate, and went out of his way to say hi to me. He could have easily walked by and given me a wave. He didn't need to interact with me. And so Paige is always at a special place in my heart. So I'm always Paige side.
Cool.
It's a good
Yeah.
it's a good side to be.
Yeah, it is a good side to be. Okay, so you want some songs. I mean, are we talking specific versions or are we just talking like songs in general where we love Paige in those songs?
I think whatever you got.
I'm gonna say it's an open question.
Okay. I was listening to November 2nd, 1996 today. It's the Coral Sky, Florida, Cross-Eyed and Painless. That is a version where Paige just absolutely tears it up on the organ and then goes into this weird, trippy, psychedelic synth. And that's my favorite, when you hear Paige moving through his kit in a way that's somehow organic, but somehow takes the band on totally new territory. I feel like Paige is often the person who takes us on the spaceship. And for that, I am grateful.
Cue the GIF where Paige is doing a circle around his rig, and it says at the bottom, "I can't find my keys" or something.
Exactly. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten that gift from family members thinking they're like hilarious. It is kind of
They are. They are.
and they're funny. It's true.
That is the equivalent of the YouTube video of what does Phish sound like to non-Phish fans, and it's like,
Yes.
like, yeah, you are the 450th person to send me this, and the last 449 people were not funny either.
Although that does kind of sound like Phish, you have to admit.
Yeah, dude, I would buy that tape.
Good fish. Yeah. You know, you said something that like I think is really worthy of highlighting. I thought this at some point last year, like, it's a great Phish jam when Paige has figured out a way to touch basically every keyboard, because it continuously is creative. He is, constantly thinking like, what is my next move? And then Trey responds to that, or, someone else in the band responds to the idea, and the jam just keeps going. It's when he moves to a different keyboard and they're like, let's move on to whatever's next. That, you hear jams kind of fall off the cliff. But like when he is moving around that rig, it just showcases such creativity and such like resourcefulness on his behalf. I like that pick though. That's a great Paige jam. What about you, Jonathan?
I'm not going to call out a specific jam, but I have a couple songs. I have a micro Brian Brinkman list of songs that are important to me.
Your favorites?
From Paige, not versions, just great songs. Tila. Strange Design. And the modern day favorite, I Always Wanted It This Way, where Synth Lord Paige throws down, gives us a little taste of unts, and we boogie until Trey decides it's time for something else. And I love that song, and I think that gives you a nice little picture of a couple of the things that Paige brings that really don't like. Trey's finally found a way to sing Strange Design on his own on his solo tours. So, and good for him. I would too if I were him. But I'm so glad that he had Paige to sing it when he wrote it, because I love it that way. And the Tila is. Okay, I have a specific version. Deer Creek 95 was my first Tila, and just hearing that happen was just wonderful. It's wonderful. Paige's singing voice is so important, and if I just focus on that, I could always say that there's probably more. There's like Life on Mars, which is the one song that I'm really actually actively chasing. Unfortunately, they're going to play that at the show after the one that I attend, as is the norm. But I'm not going to tell them which one it is, so we'll see what happens. Yeah, so that's the thing that obviously Paige is an immense player, and nobody could do what he does the way he does it with Phish, but I want to highlight his singing so I just did.
Mm,
Yeah.
it's huge.
Yeah, his singing. When I first got into Phish, and we were thinking about like Phish in the '90s, there was always something about the way that Page sang songs. And Tila is such a perfect example of this. I still remember the first time I heard it, and I was driving around with this guy who was getting me into Phish at the time. And Tila comes out and he's like, "Oh, this is part of Gamehenge. This is a really good Page song." And just listening to it, it was like haunting. It was
Hmm.
pretty. It has so many different elements. And like the way Page sings that just adds so much to the story at that point. I came up with a mini Brian Brinkman list as well.
Oh, good. I've got mine too, so I'll go after you, Brian.
And I actually, as I will, I separated this into songs and jams, so we can share both. But I always wanted this way, led my list because I think it's at the time it came out, it was the freshest original sound that we'd heard from Phish in a long, long, long time. And the Mexico 2019 version is one of my favorite jams of recent years. The Grand Prairie 2016 version is a excellent version as well. I highly recommend people listening to that. 1024 16. But then I also want to give two shout outs to two Page solo records of the last couple of years that I recommend everybody check out. Unsung Cities and Movies Never Made, which came out in
Love it.
2013. And Maybe We're the Visitors, which was inspired by Page's trip to Iceland in, I believe, 2021.
I'm so into that album. It's so good.
Yes.
It's so good. It is so cool. I sent it to my brother-in-law, who's just has really great music taste. And I remember he was like, you gave me like a Phish related album. That's cool. And he put it on and he texted me when he played it. He was like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like it's really cool. It's amazing.
It's like Page isolated all the things he's added to Phish jams since the Baker's Dozen
Right.
and just gave you a record, and it's brilliant. I also want to shout out when Phish records in Bearsville in the spring of 1997. Page's then job was to listen to the entire sessions and come up with isolated tracks, which is the Sicket disc, which is Story of the Ghost. Page is the reason why so many of those songs came from those sessions. He spent hours listening to this stuff, trimmed it all down, called these are like the 3 minutes that are isolated that would then become, Phish tracks that we would hear throughout the fall of 1987, throughout the Island tour, and would eventually be on Story of the Ghost and the Sick disc. So I will always thank him for that period in time where he, who knows what he was doing, in his spare time, but like decided to just like hole up, listen through 50 hours or so of jamming from the band and figure out, okay, there's a song here. And then these songs turn into Frankie Says, these songs turn into Ficus, they turn into Ghosts.
The Happy Whip and Dung song.
The Happy Whip and Dung song. What's the use? My Left Toe. Hey, please bring back My Left Toe. Oh my God. But just want to shout out those moments because the experimental side of Page, where he's able to tap into this like atmospheric, murky, ambient style of Phish, some of my favorite stuff about the band.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have, Megan?
I just wanted to point out a few songs where I'm always like keyed into Page, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention Rock and Roll. I mean, how awesome is Page in that song? And how much does that song always just deliver? And there are some really, really great versions. I think 1229 2011 is he just tears it up. The whole entire jam. He sounds incredible. I love when they play that song. It just hits
My
me
favorite
right.
Phish cover.
Really? Your favorite? Wow, that's awesome.
My number one.
Yeah, it's just the best. I also love, obviously, whenever they play Bathtub Gin, I'm always just thinking about Page so much and dancing to him and just blown away by him every time they play that. And then the other day I was listening to Rift and just realizing how incredible he is in that song. I mean, truly, truly incredible in that song.
I mean
And there's a
that
couple.
whole album is really like built on so many immense contributions from Page, like Maze, for example. You know,
Mhm.
like that album doesn't work without Page McConnell.
No, and that's one of my favorite Phish albums. So it makes sense. Yeah. And there's so many good things. I think that thinking about different times, like there's a 12/29/97 tube where Page is just all over it on the piano and just really, that jam's amazing to re-listen to anyway. And then the Providence Bowie, I think listening to him in that jam, I think one thing that I think about in that jam specifically, but also just in for Page, he just brings this elegance and a sophistication a lot of the time, like you were saying, Brian, with the grand piano, that is really elevates their music and also their jams. And but then also he brings this like, super crazy synth spacey weird stuff. His range is just incredible.
Yeah.
You know,
The root in like classical music and then also
Mhm.
like experimental music is that divergence is just, it's fascinating for him. What were you going to say, Jonathan?
well, I think I can bring this home. There's a reason that Page is able to really just cover all of this ground and link all of these parts together. Is I mean he's been around a while.
Where's he
Sorry, so
been then?
anybody get that?
Been
Where's he
around a
been?
while.
Come on. All right.
Where's he been?
He's been to
I don't know
town.
where he's been. Can someone tell me where he's been? He's been to town.
Town.
Okay.
Been to town.
All
And the
right.
town came down on Page.
If you want to hear
Um,
us sing that, though, you're gonna have to become a bonus subscriber so you can hear
we're
us
going to
sing
be
that.
singing Phish songs on
Yeah.
Wednesday. Do you have more to your list, or can I jump into mine?
No, I
wanna-
think
wanna
you should
give
jump
the
in.
space. All right.
I mean, I could go on forever, but we're gonna stop here. I'll stop here.
Yes,
We
some of us
could.
have to eat dinner at some point.
I know.
Some
I've got to go back to New York City tonight. We got things to do.
We'll all get to that once I get through my list. Which I will get to when we all stop
One
talking.
thing at a
I can tell
time.
you my list. So I got just a few handfuls. I really tried, guys. I was like, I've got 2 examples, and 2 led to 4, which led to, but the 11/28/94 tweezer, you talk about elegance, Meg. Like there is a
Mhm.
segment in that jam where it's just Page. And that is a very different approach that you're going to have for a 44-minute jam than most bands are capable of doing. 12/1/95 mics into Weekapog.
That show rules your face.
Rules your face, and Page on the synthesizer with Trey. It is some of the most like candy coated Phish I've ever heard in my entire life. I put that on and I just like, I don't dance well, but I just can't stop dancing. 4/3/98 Piper into Loving Cup. That is my favorite jam of the Island tour. You get Trey playing these just like dark, just like seedy chords. Mike is just all over the place. Fishman, it's like industrial music. And the entire time, Page sits at the grand piano and adds this just elegant nature to it and then goes into Loving Cup. 12/2/03 Piper. If you guys, everyone out there, if you haven't listened to the 12/2/03 Piper, pause the podcast, go listen to that Piper. It is some of the most insane Page that you will ever hear. It is so just like dark and all over the place and just insanity in the middle of the first set. 3 more. 7/13/14 Chuck Does Torture. Around like 21 minutes, Trey is playing these weird loops and Page again is on the grand piano. There's a theme here. And he's just like, he is holding it down. It sounds so psychedelic. It sounds like something off of the Victor disc, which is one of my favorite things Phish has ever done. 7/30/17 Drowned, Page on the Roads in an amazing version of Drowned from Jimmy's Night. And then from last fall, the 10/16/21 Carini. That jam rules. It's an encore 20-minute version of Carini following an excellent show. But that show or that jam is nothing without around like 13 minutes. Page moves to the synthesizers. The jam just swells up. The way that Kuroda had the lights was just like red down on the band and these like white lights coming out to the crowd. It's like it's just like printed in my brain the way that it looked. And Trey is just like leaning into the wah, but like none of it sounds as big as it does without Paige on the synths. And it's just it made me cry. It made me cry.
There you have it.
I have one more, and as luck
Do
would
it.
have it, my good
Thank you.
friend Dave Anderson is out there in the comments putting one up there. If you could put that on the screen
Ooh.
for us, he is calling the 1231.95 Sea and Sand. Dave, my good friend, what's up, Dave?
Ooh, Dave.
Is reading my mind because
Yeah.
I was going to say Sea and Sand, and that is the one. Although the next one I see might be the one if I ever get to see it again. Phish.
Well, if you're going to be in Charleston,
no,
right by,
no, not going to be in Charleston or Alabama.
That's when they told me they're going to play it again. No, but you're right, because that's the same thing we're talking about. Like that Weekapog is so funky. I mean, that riff, like unbelievable.
You know, we're
And
supposed to
then
do that in the
somehow-
bonus app. You're giving away the
hints.
top material.
Right.
Here, guy.
That's next week's bonus where we a cappella sing Phish jams that we have in our
We
brain.
sing jams. Yeah. That's a different thing.
That's a different thing. But somehow out of that groove, that makes no sense that any band would ever find that groove and figure out a way to play it. I have no idea how they play that, let alone at like 12:15 in the morning. But then Paige comes in with the Baby Grand and leads them into Sea and Sand. It's one of the all-time. I have no idea how any band makes that segue work. It's fascinating. Clearly, we could do this for hours. Clearly, we could all audition for Phish, Eric, and Idol or something like that. But we will pause it for now with Jonathan's head in his hands. We will be back on Wednesday with a very cool episode. We're digging into, we're doing deep cuts here. We're going to be talking 5/4/94 from New Orleans. And why are we talking about the show? Well, it happened on the day that we're going to be talking about it. We're liking doing these anniversary shows, but also the Cosmic Country Horns come on for the second set. It's really, really fantastic stuff. So I encourage everyone out there, listen to 5/4/94 and join us on Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. Also 3:30 p.m. Central, 2:30 p.m. Mountain, and 1:30 p.m. Pacific for those of you who are in other time zones other than the East Coast. I know it's hard. Sometimes East Coasters think that that's where everybody lives. We broadcast to all. So we'll be back on Wednesday. Before we do that, Megan, would you like to tell us once again about our sponsor, Sunset Lake CBD?
Absolutely. Let me just pull up. Do you have the ad copy in front of you?
Oh, you know what? I've got it right here.
Yep.
I'll take
You
it.
got it. You got it.
Sunset Lake CBD is a majority employed. See, I have it, but I can't read.
You have it.
Sunset Lake CBD is a majority employee-owned hemp farm located just outside Burlington, Vermont. For years, Sunset Lake was a dairy farm producing milk for Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and in 2019, they diversified and started growing hemp for CBD. Sunset Lake CBD embraces Vermont's tradition for land stewardship by using sustainable and regenerative farming techniques to build and protect healthy soils. They are 100% pesticide-free. It's the little words I stumble on. The big ones, no problem. They use minimal tillage and implement cover crops and crop rotations. They also serve as a research farm for University of Vermont agronomists to study hemp and inform best industry practices. I just want to once again shout out the hemp salve with arnica. Whoop, that rotated for anybody watching. Love this stuff. And check them out today at www.sunsetlakecbd.com. Use the coupon code HFPod for 20% off all products. Sunset Lake CBD, farmer owned, Vermont grown.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Hey, I got you.
That was good. Good way to support your teammate. We also want to tell you about our other sponsor, Cash or Trade, which is the only secondary ticketing marketplace where fans buy, sell, and trade tickets at face value. Curious if people were buying, selling, or trading tickets to 5/3/85. I don't know. Nobody will know at this point.
Free show.
But you may be trading them for summer shows where they're going to play things like Melt the Guns and Anarchy and Lushington. Finally, it's happening.
You're gonna want to see these bust outs.
Fans are able to DM each other before, during, and after transactions, where you can rate and review each other once a transaction is completed. There's no added fees to sell your tickets. All sales are fully protected by Cash or Trade's trader protection policy, which guarantees your money back should there be any issues with your tickets. Users can avoid purchase fees with a gold membership subscription. Get that gold membership subscription. Start using Cash or Trade. Visit cashotrade.org to learn more. And with that, I will bid you all adieu. Thank you all out there in niche podcast land. Nobody got it, but I will just say I stole it from Mr. Zach Lowe of the Low Post every time he introduces his podcast as the greatest niche basketball podcast. I listen to that when I go running. We are the greatest niche Phish podcast. Jonathan says he's mainstream. I haven't gone mainstream yet. I haven't gone
Me neither.
mainstream. I'm still indie. Thank you all for hanging with us here today. This was fun to talk about Paige, to show off our vocal chops. We will see you on Wednesday.
See you
Bye,
guys.
guys.